Well, hello everybody. We are going in on my second episode of Playboy Mysteries, my dog and pony show of season 5. So, I would like to just dive right into some of these subjects. Sometimes I stumble upon them, and sometimes I wonder, like myself, if you're like myself, pardon me, if you wonder if these are a real life mystery or if they're just maybe something not to that effect, because I do believe that a lot of these do go under the radar. They fall short of any kind of media attention and coverage. And the one thing that stands out in my mind before I get into this one is that the article on OC Weekly about Alyssa Bridges, it just amazes me that such, I guess you could say, detailed and thorough journalists didn't really pick up on the fact, in my opinion, that she was married to Jason Itzler, which is kind of a big detail to leave out when you're doing an investigation on your subject piece. But that's just me. I'm not saying they did that right or wrong. That's just an opinion. But I really wanted to dive into a French Playboy model, and she was, or I should say, she's more of a French phenomenon in the B horror movie circuit world in the set of the 70s, like cult cinema, kind of like your cheesy go-to typical B movies that we come to know and love from the 70s. So her name is Anne Libert. I do believe she was featured as a model in the June 1975 issue of Playboy. So there is an association. She was not an official playmate, but she was a model and did have some kind of photo spread out there in June 1975. So when I was looking into her and kind of asking ChatGPT, and it was even having a hard time narrowing down a lot of her life and information, and it seems to be on her IMDb that I want to say in 1995 or 1996, it does list her last movie as in the late 90s, but for my research, that film was either done in 1972 or 1973, and it just finally came about to having an official release in the late 90s. So that would explain why that would be her last movie on file on her resume on IMDb, because that's what I looked up right away, was going, okay, well, maybe she's not dead. But some people, I guess you could say, in my opinion, in the forum sections are trying to insinuate that she died at 35. And a lot of these European topics that I do research on, it is very much hard to find, I want to say, any kind of information on them, because it's not like the States where, sadly, it's so invasive over there for, not having very much privacy. But I did notice that it can be more of a challenge when you're researching, especially older models from the brand, that don't tend to quite come up right away, and especially also in the European and overseas, it can be very, very hard to narrow it down and find any kind of accurate informations of the sorts, or even find out if she got married or God knows what she did afterwards. But some were strongly insinuating that she died at 35, and I want to say 1982 or 1983. That cannot be confirmed, but that is just purely speculation, which is kind of odd to me to have such a strong speculation that she died at 35. And that is quite young. She was featured in June 1975, and so it did lead me down to, I wouldn't say this huge rabbit hole, because sometimes my topics, there is a bunch of information and ones don't have any information on her, and she was quite a phenomenon in the B movie world. I guess you could say she was like a scream queen in the 70s before it kind of became a catchphrase and catching on to the horror film genre of actresses. So I thought that was interesting that I think she did like The Daughter of Dracula, a bunch of vampire movies, a lot of sexploitation movies, and she even had her own genre with some other film director, I do believe, Jesus Franco or Jess Franco, one of the two, and I think maybe, in my opinion, they maybe played a play on words. I'm not too sure on that, but she did do a vast variety of work and did do a lot of nude modeling, which I would gather is what led her to do nude modeling for Playboy, because it was familiar ground with her, as she did a lot of nudism photography and just nude modeling from I do believe, the late 60s to the early 70s. So when I did look up the mysterious life of Ann Albert, it is kind of interesting to think that a lot of these things do very much go under the radar, and she was very much in a mysterious world, I want to say, back in the European modeling scene. I cannot speak for her on her behalf, obviously, as this whole video piece is just an opinion, but I do believe that her life is very much a mystery. And when I was asking ChatGPT, our friendly robot here, and I hate to always use ChatGPT as it very much sounds in the reminiscence of like in the early 2000s when we were first using the internet, like Google. Like you would, for example, some dumbass would be like, well, I Googled it, so it's got to be true. So, this is what it's very much reminiscing of as ChatGPT is like, well, I got ChatGPT to help me. It's a robot. And I would like to think, in my opinion, ChatGPT was even having a hard time deciphering what she even did after her film career. Now, mind you, again, the last film to date was in the late 90s, but that was a re-release, and that film, I want to say, that was released in the 90s, was shot and filmed in the early 70s, and just finally, I guess you could say, found a home and got released. Her father is Gene Libert, if you do research him on Wikipedia as well. There's some information that does come up, and I do believe he also, I want to say, in my opinion, passed away tragically young as well, and I'm not too sure on how he died or the circumstances of that. And this is the beauty of, I guess you could say, the intriguement of my mystery segment, is that you really just don't know what went on behind the scenes. And very much with Ann Libert here, I want to be very specific. Like, I want to assume that she's either alive or dead, but some were strongly speculating that she did die at 35 years old. And if that is the case, then one of the things that I find when doing research about European models, since it's a little more harder to decipher them as opposed to an American subject. Now, I want to say one of the reasons that I could be finding lack of null of information on Ann Libert here from June 1975 issue is because maybe perhaps I'm going on like a broken record, but the European topics that I do find myself diving into and researching, it can be very hard. And I think one of the reasons with Ann Libert is that she could have gotten married and maybe changed her last name and maybe got divorced, perhaps, a hypothetical scenario, and then maybe got married again. So to really decipher on what she is doing now is very much hard, and it's a challenge. And I guess the big red flag for me is when people were speculating in the French IMBDs and forum groups that she died, and it was at 35 years old. And if that is the case, and I'm not saying that is a fact, it's just a speculation on if she's alive or dead, but if she is dead, it's always intrigues me and I'm mind blown to the fact that there's hardly ever any follow-up articles or any in-depth range on any details, even just her life in general, let alone like her death of sorts. So like there was no cause of death, and I did try to research as much as I could on Ann Libert, and that she did have some association with Playboy in one issue, and it was a spread, I do believe, of erotic cinema in French films, I think, I want to say. But, when I do dive into the overseas ones, especially I want to say like Thailand and Australia models from the brand, it can kind of get into this, I want to say, very much a confusion to my brain, because I try to look and dive into a lot of the, I want to say, Australian models and the ones that I would consider or deem suspicious in my opinion, and it really is hard to narrow it down with a lot of the overseas ones. And I've always had a big curiosity on how one would go about being an Australian Playboy owner, and who was it Hugh Hefner that got to pick ideally and ultimately the models and playmates for the overseas, or did someone branch out and lease it and they became the owner and kind of picked their own models? And I'd really like to know how, on a side note, I am going off topic here, but I would like to really know, on a side note, like how the foreign models and foreign Playmate of the Years, how that all goes about, and how just basically how that all goes down. Because it's interesting to me that if it isn't Hugh Hefner picking them, it makes me wonder what the whole process is behind the foreign models and who gets to pick them and who was the one that leased and bought the license, I guess, for that specific country of Playboy. Because there's Playboy Japan, France, the list goes on, Australia, and each country has its own Playmates, and some are featured. For example, there might be a U.S. Playmate one year, and she might be in a foreign issue 2 years later as a Playmate. So it really makes me wonder who goes about picking each Playmate and Playmate of the Year, or even models for these foreign magazines. Because when you really think about it, back in the day, Hugh Hefner really did spend a lot of his time and was very articulate, I would like to think, in my opinion, when being the editor-in-chief of the American brand. Like, how would he have so much time to, focus on the U.S. edition and then, the 10 other ones? Like, so I'm assuming other people bought it and branched out to own it, to license it, so they could kind of be their own Hugh Hefner, I guess, if you will, in their country. But yes, the mysterious life of Anne Libert here, it's very much a big question mark, what she did after her film career. And I think she only had a handful, dozens of films of the horror genre, and kind of like nudie films and nudists and kind of sexploitation, kind of, and also, just kind of like more adult risque films of the 70s. And it did seem to be that she did bounce out after the 80s, in the early 80s. And so when I did get into venturing off into this rabbit hole of foreign Playboy models, and I guess ones that were born overseas, it did lead me to a few other models from the brand that was kind of questionable in my opinion. And it's not going off fact, but I guess that's why I call it Playboy Mysteries. So I would like to know if any of the horror movie peeps, I would like to think you guys would be a lot more familiar with Anne Libert than, ironically, the Playboy peeps that have been tuning in. But so this is a great episode, I would like to think, for both genre of fans, as the Playboy peeps and the horror genre fans. And maybe you guys can decipher if she really is alive or dead or not, because some were speculating that she could have died at 35, which I would like to think is quite young. And if she did die, then there is no accurate source of information as to when she died, where she died, or how she died. So there's not a lot of details on Anne Libert, and she did have quite, I would like to say, an impressive handful of indie movies, like drive-in movies from the 70s, European, a lot of English subtitles over them, of course. So I would always like to know your guys' opinion on this. I'm sorry about the dim lighting here, but Anne Libert, if she is alive, then I do very much deeply apologize for this video, and I'm not trying to spin out a narrative or make anybody, get worried. But when you have a couple people online wondering, where is she? Is she dead? And some are even speculating that she did die at 35. So this would be a great conversation or follow-up sometime soon in the near future. I'd like to think also as well some of the other foreign Playboy models that I do dive into. It kind of amazes me, like the ones in Japan, like Playboy Japan. Some have went to literally become rocket scientists. Can you imagine some of their stories? Like, I was a Playboy model turned rocket scientist for NASA. Anyway, I think that would be some interesting topics for the Playboy fans down the line. So this Anne Libert, I'm assuming some of the horror peeps have Googled who she is by now. So I want to know a lot more about her and if she's actually dead. And 35 is quite young. And I will get into other European Playboy models that maybe have died under suspicious circumstances, in my opinion. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in to Playboy Mysteries. Number 5. So we're going on number 5. It feels like I'm going to be doing these for a long time, but I really genuinely enjoy them. I want to say somewhere in the batch of these episodes, I think I might have solved another Playboy model murder. If I did, that would be great. It's just speculation until somebody, like I say, always, until you guys, or no, an official investigates this, then. But I want to say I'm 99% certain I might have solved it, but we won't know until somebody officially investigates some of these claims, and maybe perhaps some family and friends of these victims can perhaps get some peace of mind for their own selves, and really just kind of close that unknown chapter. So that's why I really like doing these, because it really is a fascinating world, Playboy, and to think that some of these journalists, like I mentioned before, like Alyssa Bridges, I'm not knocking their article, but it's crazy to think that some of them don't really do this deep dive in depth, which you could have found. I want to say the Alyssa Bridges, Jason Itzler information on an Ancestry.com website, but then again, I'm not too sure if that Ancestry type of websites were out back in 2002, but I found it at a couple clicks, and these guys are getting paid for it. So, just an opinion. I'm not saying you guys are doing a bad or great job. It's just kind of in between. But hey, we can all get like that, because I don't know if this Ann Libert situation, right, is 100% to be fact, but a lot are claiming she is dead at 35. So, if anyone's even got any remote information on if she is alive, just give it a good old comment down below. I'd really love to find out if she is still alive, or if she did pass away, and if she did, how did that all go down? So, anyways, thanks for tuning in to my second episode, and I will periodically be doing these throughout the week, or whenever I really get a chance to do them. It won't be like my regular, for example, Wednesdays or Thursdays. I will try to, at most, do 2 on a weekend. So, thank you very much to the horror peeps and Playboy peeps, and do not forget, if you get bored in your spare time, to go on IG and look up Niagara Falls Movie Convention. So you knew that was coming, my shameless promotional plug. Niagara Falls Movie Convention. Anyways, thanks as always, guys. I hope you have a great night, evening. I hope you have a fantastic, wonderful rest of your week or rest of your day. And I'll see you on the next